Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A few weeks ago, Indiana passed a law called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. This law immediately sparked a heated discussion throughout the country with people both in support of the law as well as intensely opposed to it. The state of Connecticut even went as far as to boycott state-funded travel to Indiana. This is just one of the countless examples that shows that controversial issues are ever so present in the world we live in today, and they are often also the toughest to talk about. They very often strike deep emotions in people and make that agree to disagree mentality an unrealistic option. The United States is a melting pot made up of diverse peoples and cultures. There is no one single identity of the United States. Our differences should be embraced, but instead they are often the cause for discrimination and hatred. People often formulate their own point of view about what is right in the world based on egocentrism, and they often overlook the perspectives of others. One way to begin to fix this is by teaching controversial issues in schools. A positive relationship exists between the discussion of complex issues and the development of tolerant attitude in democracies. Discussing controversial issues will give students invaluable tools in dealing with difficult matters, both intelligently and decisively, which in turn will contribute to them being more active and informed citizens. One social studies lesson I vividly remember from high school was our class debate on whether the team mascots of some of the other schools in my area depicting Native Americans were offensive or not. This happens to also be a hotly debated topic now 8 years later. My teacher provided sources and testaments from Native American leaders on the subject. My teacher made sure to keep the number of sources defending each side even to avoid bias. After we had a chance to read over the sources, the teacher told us to stand in one of 3 places in the class. Towards the window, if we believed that the mascots were offensive and needed to be changed. Towards the door, if we did not see the mascot names as offensive to Native Americans. And towards the chalkboard, if we were indecisive. Once the students moved to the proper place, the first 2 groups gave their opening statements, using supporting evidence to defend their stance. After these statements, the 3rd group, the indecisive group, had the opportunity to ask the rest of the class specific questions that they thought would be important enough to potentially sway them in one direction. Teachers stressed to that indecisive group that it was not necessary to have picked a side by the end of class, and while he applauded each group's passion for the topic, he reminded them of the importance of keeping an open mind and hearing out what each person had to say. We ended up doing many discussions that centered around difficult issues in that class, and occasionally it would get a little heated. But when it did, my teacher was right on top of it and very calmly reminded the students, again, that the passion being shown was excellent, but it was imperative that we respected everyone's opinion, whether they matched our own or not. These are the classes that I still remember to this day. I not only learned a lot about the topics we discussed in the class, but I also learned about communication skills and how to appropriately discuss these fragile issues with others. Personally, I believe these are the most important types of lessons that should be taught in social studies classrooms. So now you're probably wondering how a teacher can do this in their own classroom. The following are a list of strategies I encourage teachers to use when thinking about how to effectively teach controversial issues. Before controversial issues can be discussed effectively, an appropriate classroom culture must be in place so that students will feel comfortable discussing these sensitive topics. There is a conceptual framework in education known as the freedom of structure, in which its goal is to be able to have open discussions about controversial issues. This freedom of structure in a classroom would allow students to express their beliefs free from discrimination. To have this structure, a teacher must create a place of respectfulness so that their students can speak openly about their personal beliefs. Another key point of this is that students need to defend their opinions with evidence. This use of dialectics creates a healthy sharing of ideas among students. When sharing ideas supported by evidence, students will gain an appreciation for other people's points of views, whether they agree with them or not. The goal of teaching controversial issues is not to get everyone to agree on a single stance. Rather, it's to develop the skills within students on how to properly participate in respectful and potentially spirited debates on these contentious issues. Once an open and accepting classroom has been established, teachers can begin to delve into the heart of certain issues. Teachers should offer each student an opportunity to express their viewpoint so that everyone has a fair shake. A key guideline that should be used in discussions is that misinformed evidence may be contested, but a student's position on an issue should never be rejected or ignored. It should be respected. They have every right to believe what they want, as long as, again, they express it in a respectful manner. An important step for teachers when preparing to discuss a controversial issue is to expect the unexpected. One impolite or offensive comment by a student could derail an entire lesson and result in hurt feelings or worse. This is again why teachers should have a solid rapport with their students before even attempting to attack these issues, so that they will be prepared in handling a potentially unruly student or lesson. It is unrealistic to assume that an issue will be resolved by the end of class, a unit, or even a school year. And that's okay. That's not the point of having these important discussions. The goal of discussing controversial issues is not to spark animosity or fear, but in fact the opposite. We want our students to be more accepting of other people's beliefs, whether they align with their own or not. Remember, discussing these conflicts creates opportunities for learning and growth. When discussing these challenging issues, it is difficult walking that fine line between being educational, but also not being offensive to others. That is why, again, I stress here that respectfulness of others and their beliefs is critical in these discussions in order to fulfill the goal of the lesson. Even with these guidelines in place, there may be moments where students are overcome with emotion, and their teacher should be ready for that. They should make it known to those students that they are more than welcome to step out of the classroom until they can collect themselves. If a teacher notices any student throughout the duration of the activity looking extra uncomfortable or offended, it is important that a teacher speak to that student immediately. Remember, we aren't discussing these issues to make a student angry, offended, or deeply upset. We are doing this so we can spread awareness among our citizens of the world. Being an informed citizen is a responsibility. This process begins in classrooms by discussing controversial issues. For democracy to be successful, the people need to consistently engage in the issues at hand. Differing opinions need to be respected, even if they're not agreed upon. Learning how to take a stand and defend it with evidence is an important skill that students must learn in school. It is equally important for students to learn how to discuss challenging topics with their peers in a respectful and constructive manner. These skills and lessons are learned when challenging, controversial issues are discussed in our schools. We, as a society, cannot promote change if we shy away from these contentious areas. We need to address these areas head on. Only once we have been informed on a crucial issue can we address it both properly and effectively. Thank you for your time. God bless you. And God bless the United States of America.